All right, everyone. Thank you for joining. I think we're sort of people can just filter in as they may for the remainder of the session. Just to start things off right, I'd just like to first start by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land from which I'm zooming from today, the peoples of the Kulin Nations. Pay my respects to the elders past and present, future leaders, and any mob on the Zoom call today, and as well as our esteemed guest, Caroline Cull. I'm just going to run through a bit of a brief sort of history of NAIDOC Week, or just to sort of mark the occasion. So NAIDOC Week's held across the country each July to celebrate the history, culture, and achievements of us mobs, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and celebrated not only in our communities but Australians from all walks of life. It's a great opportunity for people to participate in a range of activities and really engage with our communities and learn more about our cultures and histories, and work towards that sort of reconciliatory process. So to mark this auspicious occasion, we're going to be joined today by Caroline Cull. So Caroline is a proud descendant of the Barbaran peoples, a sovereign nation west of the Atherton Tableland regions in far north Queensland. Caroline was born and raised on Kulin Nations. However, with her single mum and 4 siblings in social housing in Preston, later regional Victoria, Caroline is the founder and director of Blackwattle Consulting, a purpose-driven consulting and coaching agency on a mission to help the next wave of Indigenous leaders and thinkers. Caroline's very own hardships have fueled her deep passion to rewrite historical wrongs, to see improved outcomes in Aboriginal health, social, emotional well-being, economic and political opportunities for all Aboriginal communities. Caroline majored in counselling and possesses a bachelor in social sciences. Prior to launching Blackwattle Consulting, she had an extensive leadership career spanning across the therapeutic, community health and government sectors. She played a key role in treaty discussions in Australia, played an integral role during the COVID-19 response, and recently oversaw the development of Ballot Dern, the Victorian Aboriginal Community-Controlled Health Organisation report to the Mental Health Royal Commission. This year's theme is Heal Country, and Caroline's going to take us through her thoughts around that theme for this year, as well as sort of shed some light on some important issues relating to that theme. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Caroline, and she'll take you through the rest of the session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Joe, for that wonderful introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. It's so lovely to see you all in this online environment, enjoying NAIDOC Week. I'm just going to share my screen and we shall dive into it. Just double checking everybody can see my screen okay. Brilliant, I can see some thumbs up, beautiful. So, thank you, Joe. As I say, today and every day I acknowledge that we're on sacred, stolen and unceded traditional Aboriginal lands, and I pay my deepest respects to the landholders. I join you today from the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung language at Woiwurrung lands of the Kulin Nations in Melbourne, or its traditional name, Naarm. I live right near the Birrung Ma, or the Yarra Yarra River, which was once the ancient Uber Eats system, or the highway or pantry feeding our mob up and down the city. I, of course, would like to acknowledge the contributions that Victorian traditional owners have made this week and every other week in the 250 years of our resistance and survival. I would also like to acknowledge the Boonwurrung people to the south and all traditional owners right across Australia. May I remind all First Nations people here today on the line of the power and strength that is shared as being members of the world's oldest living cultures. I want to pay my respects to elders and ancestors and extend that welcome to you and your family and your stories. Every day I reflect on the many warriors who have come before me, not just in NAIDOC. But without their strength, their knowledge and their fortitude and the fire in their belly, I would not be here today. I'm going to invite you all. This is a bit of a different oration. I want this to be really engaging. This is an exchange, a dialogue. So I'm going to invite you all to pop in the chat what lands you are joining in from today. So, as I say, it's such an honour to be invited back to Monash to talk to you guys during NAIDOC week. And I think with the devastation that's been caused by bushfires last year, and Australia recently ranking dead last in climate change among 170 countries analysed, there's never been a more poignant time to heal country and centre First Nations communities' perspectives and science. Now, science and love are two things that probably are an unlikely duo, but I really couldn't come up with a catchy tagline for today's discussion. So if there's something that comes up for you, I'm all ears. But today I really want to talk about Aboriginal knowledge systems as central to healing country and healing our people. And love features quite prominently throughout that. So as my bio says, my name is Caroline Margaret Cal. It's a long bio. We've all got these on LinkedIn's and Facebooks, and it's really signpost of things that I've done in my life, but it's really not the full story of who I am. And I'm here to share with you a bit more about me. So I am a proud Barbaram woman, a rainforest woman. I'm the granddaughter of Irene Reaney Wallace and the daughter of Elsa Wallace. My family shares its home with some of the oldest surviving tropical rainforest in the world. My home is also some of the wettest towns in Australia. Herberton, or Oramunda, its tribal name, is home to my strong matriarchal lineage. My Nana Rini, my great-nan Bessie Walker, and my great-nan Rosie Kongu spent the majority of their lives on Herberton Mission, where my mum was subsequently removed at 10 years old. I've never been fortunate enough to live on my country, as mum did what most blackfellas in the 70s did and fled some of the sadness and the struggle and set up camp here in Naarm. And we've been fortunate enough to be living on Wurundjeri country since that time. I'm the survivor of family violence, of sexual violence. And I've spent many years doing deep, intensive healing work. I'm a fully qualified counsellor, and I've worked with many families and communities at a grassroots level, interrupting whiteness and supporting intergenerational trauma. And I'm here today as all of these things. And I share this story because in my culture, it's a key part of doing business. In our culture, we establish person and place as central to doing any meaningful dialogue. And I share my personal story and the story of my lineage with generosity. And I share it because I come with responsibility. And that's the way that we mark that, by showing that we are here today for those reasons. And I think if we've learned anything in the last 12 or 18 months, that change, real change, is often about taking more things into consideration. It's actually about excavating the layers and looking in the crevices of intersectionality. And so that's why I stand here today as Caroline Cal, all of those things. Lilla Watson is an Aboriginal elder. She's a Gungaloo woman. She grew up on the Dawson River. She's an artist, an academic, among many other things. And she said, if you've come to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you're here because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let's work together. I want you to have a think about what that statement or sentiment means. And if you're feeling courageous, pop it in the chat. Let's keep this dialogue going. I think my interpretation of this is that we actually don't need help in the benevolent sense. We have the solutions. And we demand to be heard, because how we define the problem is how we define the solution. And for too long, the solutions have not been defined or led by Indigenous people or marginalised groups. The rules have been set by governments, research, grants, agendas on their terms, on their rules. And those rules don't favour us melanin folk. They don't recognise Aboriginal sovereignty, and they certainly don't recognise Aboriginal sciences. We are constantly othered. And regardless of our political preferences or our lived experiences, I think there's one fundamental thing that we all know, and that's love. I want to start with a story, as we all do, blackfella ways. 25 years ago, 1996, 4 years after Mabo, my family put in for native title in Barbaram country. It's one of the biggest determinations in mainland Queensland, and it's one of the most infamous landmark native title claims. It's infamous because that land, home to the 4 generations that you saw before, was cleared and turned into a military base in World War II. The land was cleared so the mob up there could acclimatise to the humid and hot conditions. So my family put in the claim. The claim was presided over by many, and it was a claim that eventually made its way up to the High Court. There was one single question that the High Court deliberated on, and it's whose rights existed first. Was it my family's who existed since millennia, or was it in fact the military in World War II? Now, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but if I had it to guess, there would be some judicial bias and some of the denial. But my family continued to fight. The verdict, a nail biter, a 3-3 split. But it turned out that the yeses outweighed more than the no's. And my family eventually won the claim in 2001, 4.5 years after making the claim. This year, for the first time since colonisation, my family were permitted to cool burn my home, to record and archive ancient species, some plants that are only situated on my country. And my uncle and only Aboriginal ethobotanist, Uncle Jerry Turpin, was instrumental in leading this momentous moment for our mob. And these are really big landmarks for us. So, what does this map tell you? Quick show of a hands, even in a Zoom land, if you have seen this map. Seeing some yeses. Yes, that's great. Again, if you're bold and you want to share, what does this map tell you? And I'm going to just pause and have a little look in the chat. Thank you guys for sharing where you're coming from. So the map shows tribes and it shows language groups. It shows distinct language groups. It shows different nations, different groups, diversity. It shows Indigenous abounds. It tells us many nations. Love this. Beautiful. It does. It shows all those things. You're absolutely right. There are some things that map doesn't show, though. It doesn't show the complex networks of sharing or trade. It doesn't show that Australia was actually the birthplace of agriculture and farming. It doesn't show that we have some of the oldest aquaculture in the world in Budgebim, down here in Western Victoria, one of the UNESCO World Heritage listed sites. It doesn't show the complex relational system and social stability that allowed these groups to negotiate food sources and flourish together, because these teachings are contained in us, in our stories. These teachings are not commonly contained in modern Australian literature, with the exception of Dark Emu by Bruce Pascoe. These teachings are passed down orally through stories, through ceremonies, through strict protocol, through songlines that travel all the way from the east to the west, to the north to the south. We are the first academics. We are the first researchers. We are the first farmers, and we are the first scientists. What is science? Have we got any scientists here on the line? Feel free, jump in the chat to let me know what you think science, of course, is. Science, by the very definition, comes from the Latin word scientia, meaning knowledge, and it's a systemic enterprise that builds and organizes knowledges in the form of testable explanations and predictions about the universe. I mean, our mere existence is about questioning the world around us. And in our case, we've questioned and observed that land for 80,000 years. My people have been observing Australia's vast landscape or collecting data for 80,000 years. We've been observing or trialling or researching and analysing and providing explanations for future events. These are now called algorithms, I guess, these days. 20,000 years ago, my mob retreated while the glaciers melted here in Australia. They watched sea level rise. They experienced one of the biggest tsunamis globally. They watched the meteor showers. They studied, they observed. These stories of what they observed in a changing landscape are encoded in the land, in our DNA. If we have any epidemiologists on the line, I'm a bit of an epi geek, and we know now through episcience that these stories are actually stored in our nervous systems. I have 7 generations of ancestral knowledge within me. During the Dilba season in Noongar country, the flowers of the bulgus trees emerge in prep for the Kambarang season. Even up in the Noongar country, they have 6 seasons. I mean, it's pretty unpractical to think that here down in South and there up north, we'd have the same 4 seasons. They can see the change in the climate and they know the differences through the blossoming of the flowers. Closer to my home, they use vines to mash up and put into the creeks to stun the fish so that they can scoop up what they need and let the fish go away without being hurt by that process, rather than putting toxic poisons in the stream that kill every animal inside. The billy goat, the kakadu plum, it contains 50 times more vitamin C than orange. So the land has sustained our health and being since millennia, and we know that modern science is really only catching up. Another quick story. At a micro level, I think Aboriginal people are scientists even within their family homes. When I was a kid, Mum was a single mum, as Joe said, 5 little kids running around the commission housing. And I remember asking Mum to go to my auntie's past the time that I was allowed to go, or to go for a swim when it was freezing cold. And I remember Mum never saying yes, never saying no. She would say, go on then, see what happens. I didn't know at the time that she was actually teaching me to be my own science. She was teaching me to experience and learn through my own experience, through my own eyes, as opposed to saying yes and no. And by Western standards, that might be bad parenting. I mean, who lets a kid go swimming in the freezing cold? But for us, it was a way that we were mini scientists of our own lives. Abigail Echo Hawke is an amazing pony woman. She's the vice president of the Seattle Indian Health Board, and she's the director of the Urban Indian Health Institute. She has 20 years experience working with public health within the American Indian and Alaskan Native communities. And she's got a large body of work around First Nation science. There's one thing I really want to credit and I really want to just talk about, and it kind of forms the baseline of this knowledge system and why love can kind of conquer all in this context. So in all of her work, she has spoken to thousands and thousands of communities. And whilst all First Nations communities vary and we're not one big homogeny, there are many characteristics that bind us. And in all of her work, she's come up with this notion that's been tried and tested, that First Nations communities became science not for discovery, not for a Nobel Peace Prize, but to improve the health and well-being of our communities. And they did that for the love of their people and their love alone. Abigail talks about the need for cultural rigour to work hand in hand with scientific rigour. And I guess I'm asking all you people in this, albeit Zoom room, researchers, academics, scholars, I'm asking you to consider when you're doing your work to make sure that we're doing it with love in our heart. To talk to your families like you would talk to my families like you would talk to your own. And I guess don't get it twisted. It's not akin to a sort of community participatory approach. It's coming at this with love. I want you to just take a little moment and I want you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable. And I just want you to think about somebody that you care for, somebody that you love, someone that means something to you with compassion and kindness. You'll probably notice some physiological response. Your heart might start to decrease. Maybe the sides of your mouth might start to turn. The smells and the sounds might be a bit clearer. You might be able to hear, because when our emotions are high, our intelligence is low. Love for one another and generosity is what sustained us. It's a key tenet to our culture. Generosity, sharing canoes, sharing plants, sharing resources. It's what kept us alive. I've worked in major reforms. I've worked on the treaty process, speaking to thousands of community members across Victoria about their treaty aspirations. I have worked in the Victorian Aboriginal Community Controlled Health Organisation last year, overseeing or playing a key role in the COVID-19 response. I've worked on mental health. I've worked on these big reforms. I've stood in streets and marched. I've attended coronial inquest. And the one thing that I can't seem to grasp is that self-determination has become an end. It's become an outcome and not a means in which we engaged. And I think in some instances, it's not so much what we're doing, it's how we're doing it. It's coming at this work with generosity and coming at it with love. Self-determination has become a government buzzword. I mean, the irony that governments, these big monolithic systems, are going to give Aboriginal people autonomy and agency over their own lives is, a bit on the nose for myself. But when we talk about self-determination and we talk about it as a dogma or an ideological construct, or as it appears in the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous Rights, we lose sight of the vehicle. And it starts at that grassroots level. It starts with loving my people, loving us enough to trust that we have the solutions. It's a process of learning and unlearning. And I feel that if you come at this work with love and compassion, then you are deserving of these stories. I realize there's kind of no neat answer, and love is quite a individual thing. And I really didn't want to load you guys up with resources or case studies or peer reviews, because you guys have access and means to do all of that. What I really wanted to do is just to kind of talk about the characteristics of what I believe is how we can learn and unlearn at the grassroots local level, and how every day we conduct ourselves is supporting these bigger reforms. So there is no neat answer, there's no silver bullet, and I certainly don't profess to have them. I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert in anything. I'm constantly learning. But what I do know is it starts with the genuine recognition that we are the first peoples of this land, and a willingness for white Australia to learn our ways and unlearn some of the other ways. It's not about saying that our knowledge is better or less than. It's about reimagining the possibilities if we came together with love and compassion and that generosity. So rather than going through where to find information, which I've got a little bit towards the end, I do want to just sort of talk about the characteristics of what I think is the most useful when engaging the Aboriginal community. Because as I say, self-determination isn't just the outcome, it's the journey. So the call to action, I guess, starts within, and it starts on the ground, and it starts with all of you. And it's sitting in the discomfort. It's being okay with not knowing the answers. And sometimes when we're academics or we have our whole life's work, it's hard to sit in that discomfort. It's coming at things with a calmness and a curiosity. It's not being the expert. As I say, I'm not the expert on anything. In fact, I'm always learning. I'm always evolving. Tomorrow, I'll be a different version of me. That's life. It's coming at things with a wisdom and a mastery, which comes sometimes in silence. I think we all have one of those old uncles or aunties that don't say much, but when they do, it's targeted, it's measured, and it's important, and we listen. Silence is the biggest teachable moment. I had the very big privilege of working with Professor Greg Phillips, medical anthropologist. I will be sharing some of his work with Joe and Jamil. I really encourage you to read his work on pedagogy. And he has taught me that the importance of just sitting in the silence and letting people feel what they're feeling before they choose to respond. Sometimes it's getting out of the way. It's knowing that Aboriginal people have the solutions and trusting them enough to lead that charge. Even today, coming here, I contacted the Wurundjeri Land Council. Am I the best person to be giving this yarn? Should I be doing this? It's a constant negotiation of who's best placed. And of course, I got their blessing, but it's about understanding who's the best person for this job. Of course, it's about pipelines to support Aboriginal leaders and thinkers. Without Aboriginal people across the sector in many multidisciplinary facets, we will never see self-determination or economic empowerment at the grassroots level. It's about engaging meaningfully as you would with your family. And that's not last minute, to adhere to a research grant process. It's coming prepared to roll up the sleeves and go at a pace that is suitable for the community's needs. And sometimes that means speeding your processes up, and sometimes that means slowing your processes down. So I wanted to just spend some time on those characteristics because I think it's really important, because I think some of the rhetoric and some of the basic tenets of what it is to mobilise communities has been lost. But I really wanted to just shine the light on the very practical tools and things that you guys can do right in this moment in thinking about and reflecting on how it is that you engage with Aboriginal leaders and traditional owners. Because it's not until we work together in unity that we're really going to see this change. And as I said at the start, with bushfires and Australia being one of the biggest countries with the biggest natural resources and some of the most ancient knowledge systems, the fact that we are ranking dead last just isn't the Australia or the legacy that we want to be left known for, rather. So I guess to close, as I say, there is no neat answer. I really wanted to shine some light on some characteristics. What I will say is that it's really important to engage your land holders. If you have a skill or ability or a contribution, feel free to reach out and exchange your time and exchange your skills. Last week, I was actually at the coronial inquest for Raymond Noel Thomas. And this week I'm here talking about NAIDOC. And I just, our community is tired. We're tired. We are holding so much weight. And I guess I invite you all to channel those characteristics and think about how you can help share some of this load and work with us. Seed Mob are a youth climate network who are doing amazing things supporting climate justice with First Nations communities, and I'd recommend checking them out. There's a bunch of resources there. I encourage you to check out Jerry Turp and my uncle's TED Talk about what they're doing on Bartram Country around biomedicine. And also the works of Professor Greg Phillips, Abigail Echo Hawke, and of course, Bruce Pascoe. I put a bunch of stuff on my Instagram around people to follow. And so I recommend also popping there to keep up to date. So I'm going to close there. I'm happy to open up for a bit of a dialogue. I didn't want to take us all the way through an hour. And I just want to sort of, remind us of why we're here talking about Healing Country. And it really starts with working on the grassroots level to work with communities. And we're never going to heal country unless we start to begin to heal communities. And it's really a responsibility for everybody to pass on that baton and take up that fight. So thank you. Joe, I might hand over to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline, and some really important insights that you share there. What I'm thinking as well, we've got a little bit of time, and I think great judgment call there. I think that we don't run through the whole hour. That we maybe open it up to people. I see a raised hand there from Tara Willersdorf. So what might do, Caroline? Are you happy if we let people unmute themselves and maybe ask questions directly to you?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Tara, did you want to go ahead with your question? If Tara's still with us. All right. Otherwise, I saw a raised hand from Tony, and I've only got a limited view here. So if you're putting your hand up, definitely just chuck it in the chat and say that you're next. So I'll hand over to you, Tony, to ask Caroline your question.
Yeah, no, thanks very much, Joseph. And first, Caroline, congratulations on a terrific oration today. And I just want to open up in the context of treaty here in Victoria, and how are you finding that process, and particularly what are you finding in terms of interest in Indigenous ways of knowing in the context of a treaty?
Yeah, great question, Tony. Look, I guess I'll put a big caveat on all of these responses that the answers are within the context of my personal experience. And I certainly don't profess to be the depository of all things Indigenous. I think the treaty process represents a real opportunity to ensure that Aboriginal knowledges are visible in this landscape. And I come from a school of thought that Aboriginal knowledge is good for everybody. And so I think the treaty work that's happening on the ground is representative of that sort of reciprocal exchange. Does it come with challenges? Of course. There's a lot of work being done, but we're probably a bit far away from negotiating our first treaties. And I guess it kind of comes back to the sort of symptom of colonisation, which is that some groups, well, particularly in Victoria, we've been smashed around and colonised the most, but some groups are still in a very much of a nation-building knowing stage, and some people have moved through the knowing, being, and they're doing, and they're really practising their culture. So there is some differences, there's some challenges, but I think it represents a real opportunity to make sure that we are visible in this landscape. And for too long, we have been excluded and erased from the conversations. And I think Victoria has, the opportunity. But I will say that treaty isn't a silver bullet either. When we look internationally in other treaties, what has to come hand in hand with that is nation building and the healing process. So we need a strong service delivery sector working to support our communities. We need to have stronger education. I think treaty has become also a bit of the rhetoric or the catch cry or the everything to everyone. And I think that there's a number of other things that need to support this dialogue. I know that they've just started to engage commissioners for the truth and justice process. And I guess personally, I would be saying it needs to be a truth, healing and justice process, because we have to embed healing in all the things that we do. So I'm not sure if that really answers your question, Tony, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks very much, Caroline.
It's a complex one.
Yeah, indeed. But terrific answer. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Tony. Are there any other questions for Caroline while we've got her on the line? Right, that's okay. I think that just means that you've been very comprehensive, Caroline. I think you've touched on a suite of different areas for a lot of food for thought for people, and I think the way you've highlighted that it is a journey, and we're not looking at just the silver bullet or cure-alls. That it's going to be a process, and and understanding the sort of, I guess, the diversity of our communities and how those responses need to be localised in some contexts, or had in sort of different forums and whatnot. So we might wrap up there if there's no more questions. One last call out for questions. We've got everyone. Right, fantastic. Well, look, I just want to say thank you very much from on behalf of the William Cooper Institute and Monash University. Caroline, it was a real privilege to to hear you speak, and you're obviously a real mover and shaker in our communities and in the space, and I think that everyone will be hearing a lot more from you as well moving forward. So probably a good opportunity for everyone to to hear from you now. So thank you, and that's Jacinta just sharing the screen there. The William Cooper Institute team, we're all got a planning day today, so we're all in the same office. I'm 1.5 metres apart, so why the mask's off, so no one report me. But did you have any final thoughts, Caroline, or anything like that? I'll let you take us out.
No, I just want to say thank you so much. And I guess if anything, I hope this highlights, that there aren't any silver bullets. There's a level of sophistication and nuance that comes with most things. There's no us versus them dichotomy. And it's about really just coming at, what you're doing in your lines of work with love and compassion and generosity in your spirit. So thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to attend.
Thanks, Jacinta. Take care.